Curfew to continue within the Western Province, Ahaliyagoda and Kuliyapitiya police divisions and Kurunegala city limits until 5 a.m. on the 9th of November. Basil Rajapaksa says that the government will take steps to distribute essential goods to people in distress. Decision-making power to open factories during curfew vested with divisional secretaries and senior DIGs. President certifies to never sign the MCC compact.
A very good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. I'm Michaela Fernando. Taking a look at your top story, the quarantine curfew currently in effect within the Western Province was extended until 5 a.m. next Monday. This decision was taken when the Presidential Task Force to combat COVID-19 convened under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
The Presidential Task Force convened at the Presidential Secretariat this evening. According to the decisions made at the meeting, the quarantine curfew will continue to be in effect in this manner. The quarantine curfew currently in effect within the Western Province will be extended until 5 a.m. on the 9th of this month. Quarantine curfew will continue to be in effect in the Ahaliyagoda police jurisdiction in the Ratnapura district, the Kurunegala city limits and the Kuliyapitiya police jurisdictions until the 9th of this month. Meanwhile, it came to light at the Presidential Task Force meeting that the steps taken to quarantine people in their own residences instead of directing them to quarantine centers were more successful. In line with that, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa instructed the medical officers of health, public health officers, the police and the Sri Lanka army to expedite the home quarantine procedure. A decision was made to conduct PCR tests on individuals who are under self-quarantine on the 10th of November and to release individuals who do not test positive to the society.
Symptoms havilla cas.
Some people have said that if you develop any symptoms, even if it is a cough or fever, you have to go to the hospital. However, that is wrong. Then those people will travel to the hospital and will have to linger there for some time. This procedure has to be stopped. What we have to tell them is that if they have such symptoms, that particular individual and their family members have to be quarantined at their homes immediately. Then we have to release a hotline for them to call us and say that they have experienced these particular symptoms. Thereafter, we have to be able to go to their house and conduct a PCR test or take them to the hospital from one of our ambulances. People tend to go to the hospital as soon as they experience symptoms. That has to be stopped. We have to come up with a procedure to let them be quarantined at their homes and then inform us.
hospital එකට යනවා. ඒක අනිවාර්යෙන්ම නවත්තන්න ඕන. ගෙදර ඒගොල්ලෝ ක්වරන්ටයින් කළා අපිට දැනුම් දෙන ක්‍රමවේදයක් සහ ඒක ඊට පස්සේ ගිහිල්ලා ටෙස්ට් කරන ක්‍රමවේදයක් යොදා ගන්නට ඕන.
The Health Ministry introduced an emergency hotline to contact if any individual develops symptoms of COVID-19. The hotline number is 011 7966 366. President Rajapaksa also advised at the meeting that eradicating the virus within the areas where quarantine curfew is in effect is the ambition of the government, so that security must be beefed up in those respective areas. This is not a virus that was created by the government. This is a global health issue. The people have a big part to play in this because they were negligent that we ended up in this situation. First, we have to tell the people as to what we are going to do. Secondly, we have to tell them as to why we are doing it. Then we have to explain as to why they should follow these instructions. When we ask them to undergo quarantine, why would we do that? Why should the entire family undergo quarantine? Those factors have to be clearly communicated to the public. We saw how people left Colombo to go on vacations when we announced the curfew. So when the public becomes irresponsible, even the government cannot take the sole responsibility for it. If people will take off once the PHIs and the police are not there, this plan will fail. They have to take up that responsibility. These are the things that we should explain to the people. Meanwhile, the head of the Presidential Task Force in charge of economic revival and poverty eradication, Basil Rajapaksa, had said that steps will be taken to distribute essential goods to people in need during the curfew period. Several programs that will vest responsibilities in district and divisional secretaries, Grama Niladaris and local government representatives will also come into effect in the coming days. Basil Rajapaksa had also expressed that the monthly senior citizen allowance would be handed over to their doorstep just as it was done during the previous occasion. Meanwhile, the discussion also revolved around the 10,000 rupee hamper that is being distributed among the people.
The decisions made by the Presidential Task Force to combat COVID-19 was elaborated by the Army Commander and health authorities today.
Only those who are involved in duties in essential services will be allowed to move out, but the balance, all others are requested to be at home. And also for certain people, the selected people were given a 5,000 rupees allowance for very poor people who did day-to-day work, and that will also be the same procedure will be adopted, and they will get 5,000 rupees. And for those who get quarantined at home, they will also be given a package, a food item package by the government during this week. The other citizens living in other parts of Sri Lanka also to refrain from crossing the borders of any districts and try to remain in your own district unless otherwise it is really essential. And also those who are going for essential services, of course, there is no problem. We request you all citizens who are living out of the Western Province to remain in your district.
We have been
informed that the virulence of the virus is high this time. Studies have found that this is a new virus. This is subgroup for the SARS virus known as B142. The virus load of this is high. If there is one virus that is released to the environment while coughing or sneezing, that would have been duplicated to millions or billions by now. If the public health inspector or any health official requests you to undergo a PCR test, please adhere to that request. Remain indoors until you receive the results. If you test positive for the virus, you will not be allowed to stay at home. You will be admitted to one of the 3 hospitals that we have identified to treat patients. If you develop any symptoms such as a cough, a cold or a sore throat, we will admit you to a level 2 hospital. Around 90% of the detected cases are asymptomatic. We will then direct you to a treatment center. Individuals who develop severe symptoms such as chest pain, palpitations or severe cough will be admitted to a level 1 hospital with intensive care unit facilities.
level 1 hospital එකට admit කරනවා. ඒවයි ICU facilities තියෙන hospital.
Meanwhile, a circular has been issued permitting employees attached to 84 institutions to report to work using their service identity cards. This includes the Presidential Secretariat, the Prime Minister's Office, the Justice Ministry and all media institutions. We have prepared a special work plan in this regard. These establishments will be able to continue operations after obtaining a permit from the Divisional Secretariat or the Senior DIG's office in their area. The police headquarters has issued a directive on issuing these permits. This will apply to all production factories, pharmaceutical manufacturing factories and other related services.
සියලු සේවාවන් වලට සම්බන්ධ කර්මාන්තශාලා වලට එය අදාළ වෙනවා.
සර් නිෂ්පාදන කර්මාන්තශාලා ආරම්භ කරනවා නම් ඒක ආරම්භ කරන මේ දවස්වල තියෙන නීතියත් එක්ක පිටපතේ භාවිතා කරන්න ක්‍රමවේදය.
තවදුරටත්
The permits allowing factories to continue operations will be issued by the Senior DIG's office of that province upon consulting regional health officers and the Divisional Secretariat.
සින්නේ සඳහා බලපත්‍ර ලබා දීම නිමි.
කර්මාන්තශාලා සේවකයන් ප්‍රමාණය වගේ
ඔය සියලු
We have granted powers to the Divisional Secretary and the Senior DIG in the area to make decisions regarding that.
බලය පවර්ලා තියෙනවා.
Meanwhile, schools are scheduled to be reopened for their 3rd terms on the 9th of this month. The Secretary to the Education Ministry, Professor Kapila Pereira, said that the final decision would be made in this regard during a discussion with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 tomorrow. The Education Ministry has made arrangements to conduct the GCE Ordinary Level examination in a similar manner to that of the Grade 5 Scholarship and the GCE Advanced Level exams. A total number of 10,663 COVID-19 cases have been identified within the country from the 12th of March to the 1st of November this year. 5,738 patients are currently receiving treatment under medical supervision. The highest number of daily COVID-19 cases were identified on the 24th of October with 866 cases. Meanwhile, it was confirmed this afternoon that 193 people have contracted COVID-19. Most of them are from the Palyagoda cluster. 506 patients have recovered from the virus today.
Meanwhile, it was confirmed that 125 police officers have contracted COVID-19.
මේ වර්ධනය වුණේ දැනට
This development happened within the police officers who are currently at quarantine centres, not from the officers deployed at roadblocks. Meanwhile, people related to 400 individuals have been directed to quarantine. Another group of about 2,000 police officers are inside their barracks.
The Colombo District Secretary says that 75 million rupees has been allocated to distribute hamper packs to people in the Colombo district. Adding further, he said that distributing the hamper packs worth 10,000 rupees is already underway.
A hamper valued more than 10,000 rupees will be distributed according to the number of members in families. The distribution process will be assisted by divisional secretariats and Grama Niladaris. The government has allocated 75 million rupees to the Colombo district alone for this distribution process.
Meanwhile, hampers were distributed among families who are undergoing self-quarantine in Egodoyana Moratua.
As the chairman of the Colombo District Development Coordination Committee, I have decided to extend this relief to people living in isolated areas as well.
Though programs are underway to provide relief to the people, there are those who are still helpless. This is Grand Pass, Colombo. Due to the spread of COVID-19 and the quarantine curfew being imposed, the people here are facing hardships. They do not have money and they are unemployed.
There is nothing to drink or eat. Children don't have milk powder. We have to go through many difficulties. We don't know whether this will take months or years. I would like to make a request to provide these people with relief packages for them to find a way to live. The people are living off daily labor. It is a difficult task even to find one meal. To consume one meal, we have to work daily. It is strenuous.
We didn't even receive the 5,000 rupees which they gave. What are we to do? People here are starving. They are out of work.
This was the state of the low-income earners in Maradana.
All modes of income have been cut off. There is no way for us to live. Because of the quarantine curfews, we are unable to eat or go to work. Our cash in hand has all been spent on food.
This family with 3 children live in a rented house in Mantri Mullamavata in Mount Lavinia. The father, who is a bus driver by profession, and the mother, who is expecting a child, goes to great lengths to provide a future for their 2 children. The eldest studying in the 2nd grade and the youngest being in the nursery.
We live off my husband's job. Now since it's not there, we can't afford rent.
We don't feel like we can move forward stably now that we don't have our jobs. Many people like us get boarded for their jobs, buys houses and are now helpless. A discourse has arisen in the country over the malfunctioning of the PCR machine at the Mullaeriava hospital. The glitch had been reported on the 23rd of last month. A hospital spokesperson said more than 1,000 samples for PCR tests had been received by the Mullaeriava hospital when the fault in the machine had been detected. According to the spokesperson, these samples had been sent to other labs for testing. The PCR machine that had malfunctioned is capable of carrying out tests on 1,400 samples daily. Meanwhile, 2 Chinese specialists arrived in the country to repair the machine yesterday. The hospital spokesperson said that steps are being taken to repair the glitch in the machine. The spokesperson added that PCR testing at the Mullaeriava hospital is expected to resume on Tuesday. The Chinese embassy in a tweet said that the breakdown in the machine might have occurred as the table on which it was placed had been unstable.
Parliamentarians and ministers have been allowed to allocate funds to purchase vehicles. Massive budgets are also in the offing to maintain the cabinet of ministers. However, more than 4,500 PCR tests can't be carried out in the country daily. They claim that there is no community spread of the virus. Shouldn't they conduct PCR tests first to determine whether there is a community transmission or not? There is no machine to do that. If the politicians sacrifice their luxuries or minimize them and engage in politics for the people, I feel that more justice can be served upon the public. They were blind to the threat of COVID-19 until they passed the 20th Amendment. They are acting differently during the second wave when compared to the first wave of the virus. Since the government has been elected to power, there are parliamentarians, ministers and state ministers. However, they haven't looked into the well-being of at least the SLPP supporters in their electorate. They established a COVID-19 fund. Pompeo, who visited the country recently, said that $6 million had been donated to the fund. At the same time, they collected money for the fund by deducting the daily wage of state employees and the maximum possible amount in their monthly salaries. Businessmen attached to the private sector also donated money to the fund. However, no one knows what has happened to it. Where is the money that was donated to the fund? A request was made in Parliament to impose a curfew in the Gampaha district after 1,000 patients were identified in the space of 3 days since the 4th of October. However, attention was not paid towards that. At that time, the health minister said there was no need to impose a curfew in the Gampaha district. If a curfew had been imposed in the Gampaha district, the Paliagoda cluster would not have been formed. They paid attention towards passing the 20th Amendment in Parliament and not to curb the spread of COVID-19.
ප්‍රමුඛත්වයේ ලබා දුන්නේ කොරෝනා වසංගතය මර්ධනය කරන්න නෙමෙයි.
Issuing a statement, the United National Party has raised questions on the position of the fund that received donations from foreign countries and organizations to assist the country's battle against COVID-19. The party said that during such a situation, it recalls the fate that had befallen the fund that was set up to provide relief to people affected by the tsunami. The UNP called on the government to present its work plan to the country and to take steps to protect the people.
In more local news, a 40-year-old male from Mahara has passed away yesterday, and this is the 21st COVID-19 death reported from Sri Lanka. According to a statement issued by the Department of Government Information, the first PCR test of the patient had tested negative, and another PCR test has been carried out after the patient's demise, and this PCR had tested positive. Thereby, it has been confirmed that the patient's death was a COVID-19 related death. He has been admitted to the Valisara Hospital on the 23rd, and he had passed away yesterday as a result of high blood pressure and a respiratory ailment. A reminder to our viewers that we are joined by our sign language interpreter Brian De Cruz via Zoom today. Moving on to more local news, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has announced that the Millennium Challenge Corporation will not be signed under any circumstance under his government.
The Aruna newspaper reported today that the president said that various groups are depicting a false anti-American stance to please the gallery. The president has said that the MCC would not be signed even in his dreams. The president has said some people say they will do various things if the MCC is signed, knowing very well that it will not be done. So they say without fear that they would even leave the government. The paper says, quoting the president, that past US envoys always commence the discussions by talking about human rights and related matters, but this time around, we were the ones who reminded the USA about human rights. The article says the US State Secretary has shown his willingness to work in a friendly manner with the government by forgetting the past. The president has reiterated that the country is of a policy to protect our sovereignty and that it is not under China or any other country. The president has also said that he will not allow our country to be used against another country. He has said that he will not allow our country to be threatened in any way. The president, according to the article, has said that India is a neighbor and China is our friend. The president has said that he informed the US State Secretary that he will not allow our country to be used in a way that would threaten India.
Is the economy in peril? What you should know about Sri Lanka's national debt. Discussion with Chairman of Advocata Institute, Mr. Murtaza Jafarji, former Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Chandra Jayarathna, and former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. Hosted by CEO.
According to Bloomberg, Sri Lanka's dollar-denominated bonds have lost more than 35% in value during September and October this year, marking 2 straight months of the biggest losses in the region. How does the current economic situation impact the common man?
Sri Lanka's national debt value stands at 13 trillion rupees, with 6.4 trillion rupees as foreign debt and 6.6 trillion rupees as domestic debt. Out of the total foreign debt stock, the highest percentage of foreign debt has been obtained through international sovereign bonds at 43.2%. And the highest percentage of domestic debt is from the Employee Provident Fund, or the EPF, that belongs to the working people of the country, and the percentage stands at 35.9. The money that has been invested in bonds domestically from the EPF stands at a staggering 2.3 trillion rupees. Many experts have pre-warned the current economic situation from as early as October of last year. Meanwhile, the Census and Statistics Department has said the releasing of Sri Lanka's economic growth rates for the second and third quarters are likely to be delayed further. The department in early October said it would release the gross domestic product, or GDP, rates for both quarters together on the 15th of December. The Census Department, however, said in a statement, considering the limitations faced due to the COVID-19 pandemic at the present period, this date may be further changed. How does Sri Lanka's economic situation impact the common man?
However much the experts may be telling the common man that you are indebted, and as a result you will have to make a huge sacrifice, people don't feel it. But after some time, the common man will have to bear the entire burden. Now, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic and also the disruption to the entire external sector, exports and the services, foreign direct investments, and our ability to borrow, our balance of payments has become under very critical situation. So the country now will have to go for import controls. Once the import controls are there, it's actually a forced savings, because once what would happen is people, instead of consuming the goods that are produced in other countries, now they will have to do away with those consumption. Already the turmeric we have done away with it. The system which we had before 1977, where we had actually practically controlled the entirety of our imports in the country, and the big man will satisfy their requirements by getting imported goods from other sources. But the common man doesn't have this particular one, and specifically the problem will arise if we have to control the importation of medicines, control the importation of fuel, control the importation of basic food items like the wheat flour, because the entirety of the state sector and the people in the north will suffer out of that. So this is the time where the common man will have to suffer. Now we have come to that situation because we are no longer in a position to borrow abroad in order to make the payments that are due from us. So necessarily Sri Lanka has to now impose more and stricter import controls, and once we impose them, then only the common man will find that they will come, because they will come to a situation where they can't even eat whatever they have produced.
Can Sri Lanka reprofile its current debt?
That until our economy recovers from COVID, and until we reverse some of these tax reductions and get these reforms done in our economy to grow faster, so that we generate more resources, and especially foreign exchange resources, to be in a better position to service this debt, it is definitely something on the table. And probably I am guessing that it will be a conditionality of an IMF agreement. And since the IMF is a fund and they lend to a country, their primary requirement is to ensure that the country can repay them. So reprofiling is something that is definitely on the table, and it is something that we should seriously consider. Our bonds are trading at 56 cents to the dollar, 60 cents to the dollar. So the reprofiling will actually have an impact significantly lower than what the market is construing that the cost will. So many of these investors will actually significantly benefit. The thing is, it's a misplaced sense of vanity that says that we should not do that. To me, if you don't do that, the burden of the adjustment is more on the domestic economy, and it will be left, because the longer you postpone it, you have what is called a subordination problem that happens.
Is reprofiling a form of default?
Yes. So it's called a selected default. And the way the markets are pricing, they're already expecting, and reprofiling actually will be seen as a more positive event. But the problem is that reprofiling just does not happen on our own decision. We have to get the creditors to agree.
State Minister of Money and Capital Market and State Enterprise Reform, Sajith Niwad Cabral, says Sri Lanka is justifiably proud of its immaculate debt service record without a single default. The State Minister says it would also be noted that Sri Lanka has experienced similar challenging circumstances previously with high levels of debt. He says, for instance, during 2001 to 2004, the country's debt to GDP ratio was well over 100%, and by end of 2005, it was 91%. Nevertheless, Sri Lanka was able to gradually reduce the debt to GDP ratio to just 72% by the end of 2014 through decisive and innovative action.
In more local news, the Sunday Times reported that Sri Lanka has decided to allow India's Adani Group to handle management of the East Container Terminal operations.
The report states, and I quote, Sri Lanka Ports Authority sources have indicated that authorities have conceptualized the operations of the ECT by handing over management of the terminal to the Indian government-preferred Adani Group, which will have a 49% stake along with its local partner. Sri Lanka Ports Authority will hold a 51% of the stake, unquote. According to the report, Adani Group is also building a port in Vizhinjam to act in competition to the Colombo port at the time they commenced work. The report adds that trade unions that have been clamoring for the majority stake of the SLPA in the Eastern Container Terminal operations may have it, but the current arrangement would make sure that the complete management of the terminal will be given in the hands of the Indian partner. The report also states that, moreover, this situation is unlikely to give any competitive advantage over the Chinese-run Colombo International Container Terminal at the Colombo port.
Under the policy title Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, the government said that the East Container Terminal will operate under the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. We believe the government will stick to its policy. If steps are taken to hand over the operations of the terminal to Adani Group or any other entity, all port unions will have to make a decision. We wish to state that if any decision is made to that effect, the trade unions won't remain silent. We will protest against that in every way possible.
The expert views that you witnessed and other views on the topic can be viewed on our YouTube channel on our exclusive program, Is the Economy in Peril? In more local news, the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna celebrated their 4th anniversary today.
In a release on the occasion of the anniversary, the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna said that they were able to win many hearts in the country within a short period by setting several records in the history of Sri Lankan politics. The statement said that Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is tackling the COVID-19 situation in the country systematically. As a result of COVID-19 cases rising across the island, SLPP has decided not to hold celebrations based on the instructions of the national organizer of the party, Basil Rajapaksa. The release further said that the objective of SLPP is to represent the aspirations of the people and to carry out a program for the people in Sri Lanka.
In international news, President Donald Trump and his Democratic challenger Joe Biden continue making their closing pitches to voters across the United States in the final 2 days of the 2020 presidential election campaign.
More than 89.5 million Americans have already cast their ballots for the November 3rd US presidential election by mail. Now, this process was expanded in many areas of the United States, especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Nearly 60% of voting eligible Americans have participated in recent presidential elections, though some are predicting that the number will rise this year. Early voting numbers in both Hawaii and Texas are higher than their total overall voter turnout in 2016.
Meanwhile, a Stanford University report found that massive rallies hosted by US President Donald Trump has been linked to thousands of COVID-19 cases in the United States and hundreds of deaths in that country. However, this does not seem to be slowing down the US president in holding massive rallies in the run-up to the November 3rd presidential election. Recently holding an in-person rally in Pennsylvania, US President Donald Trump mocked his opponent, Democratic candidate Joe Biden, for his criticism of this administration's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Get back to school. Get back to school. Get back to school. Open up this state, Governor. Open up this state. And don't take advantage of those ballots, Governor. Don't do it. Don't do it. We will terminate the virus with science, medicine, and groundbreaking therapies and cures. I watched Joe Biden speak yesterday. All he does is talk about COVID, COVID. He's got nothing else to say. COVID, COVID, COVID. We agree. We agree. It's serious. So we've done an incredible job. And at some point, they're going to recognize that.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden held a rally in Flint, Michigan in an attempt to sway U.S. voters in the final days of the run-up to the November 3rd presidential election. The candidate, Joe Biden, criticized the current administration and especially President Donald Trump on his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States that has claimed the lives of over 200,000 Americans.
I can tell you this, we wouldn't have 9 million confirmed cases of COVID in this nation, over 230,000 deaths. This guy tells us it's going away. Only thing's gonna make it go away if he goes away. The president likes to portray himself, I love this, likes to portray himself as a tough guy. But when's the last time you read about, saw, heard about a president of the United States literally being laughed at by world leaders when he spoke at the United Nations? Laughed at, out loud. When's the last time you saw a president of the United States being openly mocked by the leaders of NATO at a NATO conference? And can you believe we have a president who acts like Vladimir Putin's puppy?
According to a Reuters poll, Democratic candidate Joe Biden currently leads the U.S. presidential race with 51%. On the other hand, U.S. President Donald Trump has only 43%. Many of the major polls in the United States point at Joe Biden as leading the U.S. presidential race. Will these polls turn out to be accurate? And will Joe Biden be the new president of the United States? Or will these polls be inaccurate, as was the case in the 2016 presidential election? Only time will tell.
And that is a wrap of Primetime News for today. For all these stories and more, log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. Take care and good night.